the Saints head to London, in which is, Jake, a very thematically and historically appropriate battle, right? Aren't you a fan of Last Kingdom? Is that you that likes Last Kingdom?
I do like Last Kingdom.
What is Last Kingdom? It's the clergy
Yeah.
being raided by Vikings on English soil. And here we go. The clergy versus the Vikings on English soil once again. Here's to hoping that the monks in our story can fare a bit better than the monks of old when the raiders used to land on their shores. So it's a very appropriate matchup in that standpoint. Now, unfortunately for us, Jake, the Saints are looking more like those monks than the warrior monks that you would ideally want to fend off such an attack. As I have a very basic question, Jake. You spent a lot of times in NFL locker rooms. You've been, well, I don't know, you're never really on a bad team, were you?
8-8 was the worst.
Okay. So yeah, not really. So never really on like a truly bad team. But you've been on teams that have had bad starts, going to rip off 11 in a row,
been
right?
4-8 before.
4-8.
Yeah.
Okay, before finishing 8-8.
8-8, yeah.
Okay. So my question to you is, how fixable right now are the issues that you are seeing with the New Orleans Saints? Because they are many.
Mm-hmm.
And they seem very widespread and wide reaching. I got some numbers that we can get into here. If you want to do the numbers first, go ahead and answer the question now.
It's pretty simple for me because when I was part of a 4-8 team, we knew we had dudes on the team.
Yeah.
We knew we had LT, Sproles, Phillip Rivers, Gates, Vincent Jackson, Sean Merriman, Eric Weddle, Quentin Jam. Like, we knew we had guys.
Okay.
Dudes, not just guys. I mean, I was part of the guys. They were part of the dudes.
Yeah.
So we didn't panic. Even when we were 4-8, like, if you have a roster that you know has skill and you know you have talent, it makes it so much easier. Because we've had teammates that we played with at LSU that have been in Jacksonville when Jacksonville was horrible.
Mm-hmm.
We've had them there when they were in multiple spots, and you're like, man, it's just toxic. It's bad. By week 6, you're just ready to get out of it and go home. You don't get that when you have a talented roster, and you don't get that when you have leadership. And the Saints surely have leadership.
So they check both those boxes.
They do. So the conversation of, are we any good? Can we get it fixed? Is this just not going to work? That's not happening in a locker room that has that talent, that leadership. So that's the good part. But now the leaders have to demand more. They have to demand better play. They have to demand better focus. So, like, in this situation, DeMario Davis and Tyrann Mathieu, like the defensive players, because they're still playing at a pretty high level on defense, they have to find a way to get more out of the offense without it becoming an issue.
Yeah.
Right? Because, look, as offensive players, you know you're playing bad. You know the defense is kind of holding their into the bargain up, and you're not. But you have to be willing to accept leadership and accept whatever you've got to do to get it fixed. And so there is a fine line there. Because I've been on a part of teams. The team we always talk about where we were first in offense, first in defense, 32nd in special teams. Look, at the end of the year, like Phillip Rivers and those guys and Weddle, they're like, hey, guys, we're good. We're doing our part. Y'all have got to do better. And we accepted that because we knew as a special teams unit we had to. So I think the Saints have maturity enough to be able to handle that because when you look at the roster, they've still got so much talent. Now, I know they have injuries at the receiver position. There's going to be question marks there. But like on the offensive line, right, if I'm James Hurst or if I'm Ramczyk, if I'm Eric McCoy, I'm like, hey, Pete, Ruiz, like we got to figure this thing out.
Yeah.
Like we have got to play better. Like when you look at the grades, we know where the problem is. We have to have a better plan for certain pressures and certain, like you come about it in a certain way. Like you're not just a total ass about it.
Yeah.
Right? And I think this locker room has the ability to do that. Not every locker room does, but they have the two things that in my career you had to have, talent and leadership to be able to fix it.
So it's interesting, Jake, because we had not talked about this before the show. It's the first time I had posed you this question, and I had it written right here in my notes, kind of a reinforcement what you're talking about. I said, after reading that Duncan piece, quote, maybe an ironic, I said, this is not Duncan, that made it confusing. Maybe an ironic, encouraging sign is that in this last game, a lot of times it was the best players making the mistakes, right? You think about Alvin Kamara losing the fumble. You think about Tyrann Mathieu missing an open, and Tyrann's actually graded out wonderfully, but missing an open field tackle that leads to a touchdown. Will Lutz, a field goal missed, a field goal blocks.
Yeah.
Eric McCoy even with 2 holding penalties. And you say, well, T-Bob, that's a bad sign, right? The good players are doing that. Well, yes and no, right? It's not ideal, but also, with those guys, that sort of game is the exception rather than the rule. So, like, they will find their level. They will be good again, and then they just have to bring along, like Jake is saying, the Petes and the Ruizes and the other guys who need to get better. But make no mistake, Jake, offensively right now, it has been awful. Like, it's sometimes when you see the numbers, it just really doubles down on it's even worse than what you've kind of witnessed live. In 38 drives this season, the Saints have 6 touchdowns, 6 field goal attempts, only 3 of which have been made. So you're 50% clip on kicking, unbelievably bad right now. 6 touchdowns, 6 attempts, then 16 punts and 9 turnovers, okay? So you have more turnovers and touchdowns, more turnovers and attempts. You have more punts than touchdowns and field goal attempts combined. It's been awful. You're only converting on third down 33% of the time. And when you look at the offense, Jake, it's kind of like we talked about. It's not just individual players making individual bad plays. It even starts with the coaching staff right now, right? This is a team that seemed unable to handle a 0 blitz this last game out. And so if we're thinking about, being fixable, where does it start offensively specifically in terms of like the actual nuts and bolts fixes?
I mean, I would start with some of the things that they're giving up in protection. You have a quarterback now that's seeing ghost. You have a quarterback now that if we go back and I watched some of the tape last night, he's anticipating somebody's going to come free. Now, if somebody's going to come free, that means you've built it into your offense where you're getting rid of the football to someone who should be wide open. But if you go back and you watch the tape, there's times that Jameis is already kind of grimacing for a hit whenever they're bringing pressure. And some of that I'm like, I kind of get because they've let a lot of guys free. There just has to be a better plan for it because when your quarterback starts to see ghost, it's hard to break him of that. And he's throwing off his back foot. He's kind of anticipating he's going to take a hit. And that, to me, offensively, that has to get fixed because you have 2 veterans of an offensive line. You've got a coordinator who's been there for a very, very long time. You should not be getting tricked at the NFL level by some of the blitzes. Look, double A-gap mugs, it's very, very difficult, but you got to have a better plan.
Well, everybody does it.
Everybody does. Look, that's right there. That's what the Panthers just did. There was no plan.
Yeah.
I mean, you got a free release, Jeremy Chin, right there in your face. Now, that has to be fixed. Like you have, Olave's got to run hot. Somebody's got to run something. That is elementary. What are we doing? It can't happen at this level. It shouldn't happen at the college level. It happened to LSU against Florida State. They fixed it. They've got their cover 0, right? The Malik Neighbors against Mississippi State.
Very fair.
That was cover 0. Yep. They made the adjustment from the Florida State game. It's a 30-something yard pickup for LSU.
Yeah. On a critical 4th down that you had to
now
have.
Is 3 games where the Saints have not had a plan. And so because of this, they're getting yards. Like in the NFL, they're 8th in yards offensively, but they're 23rd in points. That shouldn't be that big of a drastic change.
I mean, think about this, Jake. They were never even really close to beating the Panthers, and Carolina had just 293 yards on the day. Carolina was just 4 of 14 on third downs. Carolina gave up an average of 6.7 yards per play to the Saints. And yet, again, the game wasn't even as close as the 22-14 final score line. I mean, that is a sign of the team that is messing up in some very fundamental, drastic ways like Jake is laying out. Now, so I kind of feel you, though, right? We expect the best players will play better. Pete Carmichael in that offense should be able to figure it out. Maybe there's a little more reason for hope going into Sunday than it feels like. I'm kind of grasping at straws here, if you can tell, trying to pump a little bit of sunshine.
All right, so T, another double A gap.
Yep.
All right, and I know you're listening on the radio. It's a little bit more difficult than if you're watching the Bayou Ford YouTube chat. But look, you got 2 linebackers, 1 in each A gap.
Gaps are on either side of the center.
This is yet again another example of you not having a plan in place. Like Jameis tries to throw hot off this, but this is the guy that's coming. Like if we play this tape, that's not your hot. Your hot's got to go somewhere else because you got your back on this side. And
Leads
so
to a pick.
I just never seen a team not have a plan for cover 0 the 3rd week into the NFL season.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if that's communication between the coordinator and quarterback, the offensive line and the quarterback, whoever that is, but it's always going to fall on the quarterback to get you in the right play. Mm-hmm. And when Matt gets here in about 30 minutes, he'll be able to tell you exactly where you should have gone with the ball, how you handle double-A gap mugs, because Mike Zimmer was in his division for a long time, and you just got to have a better plan in place. That's not the plan.
No. So, again, I don't know exactly what to make of this. I guess it's a bit of a perspective question, right? It's in the eye of the beholder whether or not you think the Saints can get it fixed Sunday against the Vikings. There are reasons to believe so, but also the kind of head-scratching nature of how's it not fixed to this point yet maybe is a bit of a red flag.
Yeah, I want to ask you about this before we take a break. So, Jameis at the end of that game, and we're going to get you to break it down because you do a great job of breaking down double-A gap mugs. It's something that obviously that you and I have talked about a lot.
Carolina must listen to our show.
I think, well, there's no question about it. Why wouldn't you? But Jameis started to anticipate that he was going to get hit or sacked before it even came free. And almost like he was seeing ghosts a little bit. And look, he's a veteran player. He's been in the league a long time. But there's a couple of plays, he started grimacing, and then they got it blocked up, and then he'd go back into his drop. As a quarterback, obviously not everybody does that.
That's a bad spot to be in.
Is it? I mean, is that something that
and you can blame it. I mean, you can attribute it to a couple different things, but like we were talking about when I got here, they could not block A gap, double-A gap mug. This is double-A gap mugs. They don't have an adjustment for it, so you know that if you don't adjust it, more than likely somebody's coming free
to kill you.
Just like this, you should be able to pick this up. It's hard as hell, and there is not that many protections that can do it. But that's why this defense is so great. But I think after the entire game of having free people come free, it's and you're not making an adjustment, and as a quarterback you're not making an adjustment. You're like, well, I'm probably going to be hot.
Ugh. And so I maybe want to dive into this a bit further on the other side of this break.
Silly,
because
I don't know who he's throwing to on this one. He's fading back as well. Where's he going with the ball?
That was just this place sucks. This place sucks.
He could have been throwing it out, honestly. He could have been just throwing it away.
Well, that would have been intentional grounding.
Well, I'm saying if he just throws it
but he's going,
this guy's
no,
head.
No, you're not doing that. That's maybe he is. Chance of interception. I mean, I have no idea where he's going with this football.
Yeah, it's
There's not enough.
Oh, actually, yeah, he's going deep. I thought he was taking that out. I don't know.
Yeah, he was throwing that thing away, but
going to get it grounded.
Get it grounded.